Hey, good morning. My name is James. For those of you who are new, it's so good to be back up on this stage. I feel like I miss you guys. I haven't been here in 2 weeks. CRW, men's CRW was just rocking, man. It was so good. We've been learning as a church from the book of Exodus. It's been quite a journey. And part of the way that we've been learning about Exodus has been reciting a list together. So we're going to do that together this morning. You guys know the deal. That's how it goes. Let's do it together. Genesis 50, Egypt. Jacob's family becomes the people of Israel. 400 years, slaves. Moses, burning bush. Let my people go. 10 plagues, Red Sea crossing, journey to Mount Sinai, 10 commandments, the tabernacle, the glory of God. Let me pray for us. We'll get started. Lord, thank you for this morning, and thank you that you brought everybody here by your perfect will. We're trusting in you this morning that you will literally speak to our hearts and awaken us to the amazing news that's presented through the Bible that points to Jesus. I pray these things in his name. Amen. I drive a lot on the Northwest Arterial, and I also drive a lot on 20. And one thing I absolutely despise on those highways is red lights. So like I'm doing the speed limit, maybe one or two over, nothing much. And as I'm approaching a light, I see it turn yellow, and all of a sudden I'm in my heart, dang it, yellow, right? Because basically what I'm reading through that yellow light is I'm going to have to stop. And I hate stopping, I don't like getting the red light. And, it's funny because most of the time when I'm so frustrated that I got the red light, I'm not even late to where I have to go, And what's even more frustrating is when I am late because I seem to get twice as much red lights. I don't know if you guys can relate to that idea, but yeah, I love to go. And I don't know if you can relate to that. Like, I love to go now. I love quick, I love fast, and not later, And this idea of go is much more than just found in the car on the road. This idea of go saturates our culture. At Hy-Vee, it's saturated. At Hy-Vee, if you're in a rush and you just have to get a few items, you go to the express lane because you just got to go quick now and fast, right? That's just kind of how it works. And then like if you're on Amazon or on eBay and you're seeking to order something, you have a few options. You have the 5 to 7 day delivery. You have the 2 to 3, and then for just a few bucks more, you have the express. I don't know about you, but if I had the extra money, I'd press the express thing every time, right? And then this idea of go continues to saturate our culture in some of America's most famous, successful restaurants. McDonald's, drive-through. Chick-fil-A, drive-through. Starbucks, not in Dubuque, but they have drive-throughs. Dairy Queen also has a drive-through. And here's the thing. When the drive-through can't produce a gourmet burger in less than 60 seconds, we just get upset. Come on. We live in a fast-paced culture. Our culture says that we need to produce. It says that we want results now. We don't want them later. We just want them now. And our society fails to recognize or value the gift of stopping, to rest. So that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about this morning. I'm going to talk to you about this idea. The idol of go versus the gift of stop. The idol of go versus the gift of stop. We've been in the book of Exodus, like I said, for quite a few weeks now. It's been a great journey. This morning, if you have your Bibles or if you have a phone, you could flip that on or turn those open. And we're going to be in chapter 31. And this morning, we're only going to be in 5 verses. Chapter 31, verses 12 through 17. The whole time, we're going to be in 5 verses. So you're following along, that'd be great. The book of Exodus is a dynamic book. The first half of the book is this fast-paced narrative of these huge, colossal, epic events, and it keeps the reader on the edge of his seat, you know? And as we read and journey through Exodus, we get to chapter 20 and things begin to slow down. The big, epic, colossal events just start to slow down. Here's a quick side note for those of you who are longing to learn how to read the Bible more effectively. When you're reading a story in the Bible and the story, a narrative, when you're reading the narrative and the story begins to slow down and explain things in detail, attention, heads up, it's important. And that's what's been happening in Exodus. The story of Exodus has slowed down, and for the past 10 chapters, from chapter 20 all the way to chapter 30, things have slowed down. God has been providing Israel with detailed and specific instructions on how to build the tabernacle. Last week, if you weren't here, Dan spoke on the tabernacle and how the importance of it was that God was coming to dwell with his people through the tabernacle. Awesome. It's really, really important. So this morning, our chapter is chapter 31, and it's located at the very end of the lists of instructions on how to build the tabernacle. And chapter 31 is just so interesting. After 10 chapters, literally from 20 to 30, after 10 chapters of instructing the Israelites to go, to move, to build, and construct the tabernacle, God concludes all of the instructions after 10 chapters with this simple command: stop and rest. He concludes the 10 chapters with this word called the Sabbath. It's a Jewish word. When you hear, I'm going to throw it around a little bit. I want you to be familiar with it. When you hear the Sabbath, don't get freaked out. I want you to think rest. I'm going to say Sabbath, and you could think rest. God is about to tell Israel in our chapter this morning to stop and to rest. And I'm going to emphasize this idea of stopping to rest in 2 points. If you're a note taker, you could follow along. I'm going to propose to you this morning that this idea of stopping to rest is good. The first point is because it's humanly. And stopping to rest is also really, really good for us because it's holy. Stopping to rest is humanly, and stopping to rest is holy. So again, we're in Exodus 31, chapter 31, verses 12 through 17. So let's begin with verses 12 and 13. And the Lord said to Moses, "You are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbath day." Did you hear those 2 words? Look at those 2 words there. Above all, you shall. You see those? You shall. Up to this point in the book, those 2 words, you shall, are really, really normal. So for the past 10 chapters, like I said, the instructions have been happening, and each chapter starts off with those 2 words. Every single chapter starts off with those 2 words, you shall. Listen to the consistency of language starting in chapter 21 all the way up to ours. Ready? Here it goes. Chapter 22 begins with the words, you shall, then follows an instruction to do the tabernacle. Chapter 23, you shall, instruction. Chapter 24, you shall, instruction. You're getting it by now. Chapter 25, instruction. Chapter 26, instruction. Chapter 27, instruction. Chapter 28, instruction. Chapter 29, instruction. Chapter 30, instruction. Now we're at our chapter. Chapter 31, rest. The instruction changes. It's no longer a going or a do instruction. It's you shall rest. This is interesting. After 10 long chapters, they finally come to an end. And the phrase, you shall, the pattern of the phrase, you shall, changes. Look at verse 13 with me again, though. You are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbath day. Not just you shall keep my Sabbath day, but what? But above all, you shall keep my Sabbath day. After 10 chapters of working and doing, above all, Israel, I want you to pay attention to this, because this is, I'm going to put at the priority of the construction to building the tabernacle. Above all, most important, you shall rest. What comes to mind when you think of the people of Israel? I don't know what comes to your mind if you're familiar with the people of Israel. Let me tell you who the Israelites were not. They weren't these like holy monks, right? Who like had hunched over backs and went around chanting like, oh, God, praise you, right? They weren't like really like that. They didn't like have halos over their head. And they didn't like remain in this like, no, they weren't that way. They were just normal people. The Israelites were just normal people. They were God's chosen people, but they were just normal human beings. They had jobs and they had families. They had farming jobs and agricultural jobs. They had baking jobs and cooking jobs. There were some hunters. There were some shepherds. There were priests. There was actually government positions for the Israelites to partake in as vocations. And surprisingly, the Israelites, they had places where they slept. They had like homes, right? And inside their homes, there was things that needed to be done. Like husbands and wives and children needed to be cared for. There was stress, clothes that needed to be washed in the Israelite community. Animals that needed to be tending. The house needed upkeeping. You know, the type of things that you and I are just used to. Israelites experienced those things. So this commandment to rest that God was giving Israel wasn't just directed exactly towards the building of the tabernacle. Rather, this idea of rest was to cover their whole lives as humans. It was meant for their flourishing. It was essential for their well-being. I don't know if you're very familiar with the book of the Bible that's before Exodus. It's called Genesis, right? And this is what will happen if you open up to the book of Genesis. You'll open up to the first chapter, and this is what you'll read. You'll read God creating the heavens and the earth. That's what he does in 7 days. And I've seen this creation story in 7 days illustrated so beautifully. I need you to see it with me because it's going to help us better interpret what's happening in our text. This is what happens on the first day when God creates the heavens and the earth. Listen, he goes like this. He works, and then he rests. Day 2 in the creation of the heavens and the earth, God works and then he rests. And day 3, work and rest. And day 4, work and rest. And day 5, work and rest. And day 6, work, rest. Day 7, rest, rest, no working. This idea is present in our chapter, verses 15 and 17. If you follow along with me, God is speaking to Moses. He says this: you have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day must be a Sabbath day of complete rest, a holy day, dedicated to the Lord. Jumping down to verse 17. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, but on the 7th day he stopped working and was refreshed. You see, here in our passage, God is calling the Israelites' attention back to the creation story, back to the very beginning of time. And God is seeking to remind the Israelites that they're just creatures made with limitations. And God makes everything good, so their limitations are good. Human beings are designed to rest. It's a good thing. And I think this morning, I don't think that any of you would disagree with me that the idea of rest is good. I think it would be safe to say that we all agree that the idea to rest is good, but the problem is we don't know how. No, truthfully, we don't know how. Have you ever seen a smoker trying to quit smoking? It's a little bit like this. The smoker tries to quit smoking. He knows it's not good for him, so he takes the carton of cigarettes, throws it in the garbage. He goes to sit down. And as he's sitting, he's not exactly sure what to do with himself because he doesn't have access to the cigarettes. He's trying to get away from it. So this is what he does. He pops in a piece of gum. And after a few moments, he begins to chew a little harder because he doesn't know what to do without the cigarettes, right? And then the leg begins to go. Right? And he still doesn't know what to do with himself away from the cigarettes, so he begins to pace the room. This is like us as we practice resting, true rest. Like, we don't know how to fully, our culture doesn't know how to fully embrace rest. Like, the type of rest that stops looking at the watch for a second. The type of rest that is just still and it doesn't fidget with the cell phone. Or the type of rest that just sits and is clearing the mind of the temptation to think about the next thing on the to-do list. That's the type of rest that's happening here in our passage. I took my dog, Tango. His name is Tango. He's a cool little guy. I took him for a hike the other week down to Swiss Valley, and it was my day off. And I did it. I'm addicted. I took my cell phone, I threw it in my book bag on the hike. And the problem was I didn't turn my cell phone off. I left it on, not on vibrate, but on ringer. And as I was hiking, all I kept hearing was ding, bing, ding, bing. It was the list of emails accumulating. And it was a massive amount of text messages coming, calling my attention and demanding me away from rest. It was just so hard for me. I really want to look at my phone and pay attention to my emails and think about the text messages coming in. Our minds are trained like this by our culture. Our minds are trained to go and to do and don't value rest. Have you ever been in your bed before you fall asleep with your eyes closed and you're really just trying to fall asleep, but you can't because your mind just simply cannot stop thinking about all the things you have to do the next day and the rest of the week? You ever felt that before? Have you ever tried to pray to God, sincerely? Tried to pray to God on your knees or maybe in a chair or maybe even standing up, but you just fail to because every time you close your eyes, you can't stop thinking about everything else besides God. Like your mind is on every single other topic in the world but God. We're just distracted because our minds are trained to go. You ever felt that? Slow down. God's saying rest. Verse 17, God says this, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he stopped working and was refreshed. What the heck does that mean? God was refreshed? Like, God? God doesn't grow weary or tired, we know that. What is that? The verse says, and on the seventh day he, God, rested and was refreshed. Let me help you a little bit. That word refreshed is really unique. In the original language, in the Hebrew, it's used as a verb. It's an action. And it means this, to take a breath. So after 6 days of working really hard, creating the heavens and the earth, God went like this. He looked and he said, that's what God did. This is more poetic language because God is not a human being. He doesn't need to rest. It's more poetic language. It's helping us as humans relate to God. It's painting a picture in our minds of what rest is supposed to embrace. God was setting a pattern for work at the beginning and the foundations of time. And our passage is just so encouraging. God is encouraging Israel to do that. What great news. So after 10 chapters of telling Israel to work and to go and to build and construct and to live and to move, he says, no, now I want you to rest. But not just rest. Above all, Israel, rest. See, the same goes for us. We're not different than Israel. We're creatures, human beings like the Israelites. God is encouraging you to take a breath. Remember the Sabbath day. So after a week of work and kids and spousal duties and cleaning and traveling and volunteer nights and deadlines and phone calls and emails and reports and text messages and meetings and going to meet with people and going places and doing various things, God is saying, I'm calling out to you this morning to rest. So I'm not saying that rest needs to look like you being a bump on the log and doing nothing. I'm asking you that, is there something that makes you feel refreshed? And I'm encouraging you to do it. Do you like to watch Netflix and chill? Do it. Do you like to go hunting? Do you like to go get your nails done? Do you like getting coffee from Starbucks? Do you like reading a book? Do you like sitting in the big comfy chair in your living room? Do it. God's saying it's good for you. It's humanly. And the second point that I'm going to talk to you about today is resting is holy. Here we go. Stopping to rest is holy. Point number 2. Let's read verse 13 together. This is God speaking to Moses. He says, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbath day. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, make you holy. We've been reading and learning in Exodus about this idea of covenant. So God makes a covenant with Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. And we learned that a big part of that covenant was to make Israel a holy people and a holy nation. And our text this morning includes that idea. Look back at verse 13 with me. He says, you shall keep my Sabbath day. Moving down a little bit in the verse, he says, that you may know that I, the Lord, make you holy. Israel's obedience to obeying the Sabbath day plays a huge and colossal part for them becoming holy. The Sabbath day was a fuel that progressed the Israelites' holiness. How amazing and how beautiful that God intends for us to rest, and part of that intention was not only for our well-being of resting, but actually making us holy. But then all of a sudden, I need your attention here, then all of a sudden there's a stark contradiction in this text. We see this beautiful idea of flourishing in rest, but let's read on to verse 14 and 15. You must keep the Sabbath day, for it is a holy day for you. Anyone who desecrates it must be put to death. Anyone who works on that day will be cut off from the community. Working down to verse 15. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day must be a Sabbath day of complete rest, a holy day dedicated to the Lord. Anyone who works on the Sabbath must be put to death. Some of you just checked out. When you heard that, no, listen. I'm talking to those of you who have been hurt by the church. When you heard that God kills people, you checked out. And I edify you because you had an amazing amount of courage to step in our church building. We welcome you here. When you think about God killing people, you think about the other side of the country, the other side of the world where people are going around slicing people's heads off in the name of God. And you're also thinking about the vulgar, harsh, judgmental Christians who make nasty Facebook posts about their God and judging sinners. And you're thinking about Christians who have a political agenda when they speak about God. That's not what's happening here. And I'm going to ask for your attention. Please be patient with me. I need you maybe just to give me a chance. I just want to tell you what the Bible says. I want to check out myself here too. It's uncomfortable for me. So yeah, our passage, it explicitly mentions with a no holds bar that disobedience to the Sabbath results in death. Why? Well, if you're unfamiliar with the rest of the story thus far as we've been journeying through as a church together in Exodus, here's who the Israelites used to what their lives used to look like. They used to be slaves in this place called Egypt. And there they were whipped and they were beaten under this harsh rule and reign of this guy named Pharaoh. And they were forced to work hard, laborious hours under the Egyptian sun. And they were forced to produce so much without any resources. And it was there where Israel called out to Yahweh, the God of Israel, God himself. And they called out for his rescue, and God came mighty to save. God came mighty to save. So for the past 10 chapters, from chapter 20 to chapter 30, including our chapter, God has been teaching Israel how to respond to his grace. He's been teaching Israel how to function in a covenant relationship